Gummit.
Sorry about that. It was not actually flipped to on. Check, 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 check. How is this for right here? Hopefully we get some action in the background this time. This is exciting. Like...
All right, thanks for joining us again online for an election update this Tuesday night, election night. I'm Casey Nolan. We are starting to see what we've been waiting to see. Some results are rolling in. We're also going to be joined by a political analyst, a political consultant, and our own Abby Larico is reporting from election headquarters. But first, the numbers. We are, of course, following the race between mayoral candidates Alderwoman Kara Spencer and Treasurer Tashara Jones. And as you can see, things have narrowed just a little bit. The difference was much greater when we were just looking at absentee. Well, now we are looking at 28% of precincts reporting. And with those votes in, Treasurer Tashara Jones is up 55% to 45%, almost 2,000 votes over Kara Spencer. Again, 28% reporting. The margin has narrowed since the last time we were just checking the absentee results. We'll get some analysis here in just a little bit about what 28% should tell us and where those votes might be coming from. Also on the ballot for voters in the city of St. Louis, and city of St. Louis voters here for Prop E, And Prop E, this is the earnings tax, takes 1% out of your check if you work in the city of St. Louis or if you live in the city of St. Louis. And it funds about a third or so of the city's budget. And every 5 years, voters have to approve it. And right now they are 79% to 21%. That pays for things there. There you see $240 million a year. It is approximately how much it brings in to equal 36% of the annual budget. Pays for things, helps pay for things like police, fire, trash collection, et cetera, right out of the general revenue. All right, let's move on now to Prop Y. This is an MSD project that's asking voters how they want to pay for work MSD has to do. Once again, with 28% reporting. In the city, this is something that county voters who are MSD customers will have to vote on as well. But in the city, this is got a pretty significant margin, to say the least. 79-21 on Prop Y. Again, that is just asking voters how we should pay for MSD work that must be done. And yes means bond it, keep the rates down over time, pay a little bit in interest, and that is what is passing right now. Okay, but the story, the headline at the very least that everyone is watching is the mayor's race. I want to bring in Show Me Victories political consultant Braxton Payne. Braxton, a Democratic organization, you do work here in the city of St. Louis, consulting, polling, but not for either Kara Spencer or Tashara Jones. So we're kind of bringing you in as kind of a neutral Democratic third party here, if you will. First, if your candidate were in this race and you saw 28% of the precincts reporting, you were down by 10, would you think it's over?
I would not think it's over, but I do think that Tashara is in a great place to win this race. You look at where the votes are coming in, and the absentee votes alone, I mean, when you're up 60 to 38% with the absentee votes, traditionally you're gonna come out ahead at the end of the night. So if I were Tashara's camp, I would want to be squarely there right now, and I would be getting ready to celebrate. That's for sure.
We had, for those who weren't with us in our earlier show, former Congressman Lacy Clay showed he might have some political analyst chops there. He gave us a pretty good breakdown of the city election. And he was saying that in his estimation that he believes a lot of absentee votes are kind of potentially older voters, kind of that, what he described as, sound like he was saying kind of that traditional Democratic get out the vote machine, whereas he thought maybe those who actually go to the polls on the election day can be younger, potentially the Central Corridor. I don't know if you first, do you buy that? And then second, what does that mean for either candidate if we're waiting more for the day of vote?
Yeah, I think Congressman Lacy Clay is 100% correct. But I also think that younger voters are split in this election. So therefore, that's interesting to see the widespread that Tashara got in the early vote or the absentee vote. I would think that traditionally South Side, which I think is Kara's base, would come in for her at a larger percentage than it did. And you saw that the larger percentage came in for Tashara. And I think that she also ran a great campaign to get people out to absentee vote. Also very similar to what she did just 6 or 7 months ago in August. She got a great percentage in absentee votes. She was about 50-50 with Mary Pat Carl, with her opponent Jeffrey Boyd in the primary, and she came out with 55% of the vote at the end of the night. So I think that's she showed that she could run a very good campaign, not only early, but also she's showing that her base is not only North City, but it's also the Central Corridor, which is something that's very different than traditional St. Louis City campaigns.
Well, speaking of very different than traditional St. Louis politics, what do you make of the progressive push, movement, momentum? Is it there in the city right now? There was this effort to flip the board, they called it, and we're seeing some of that. It looks like we've seen some incumbents go down to people who might describe themselves as a little more progressive on the Democratic side in the city already, because in some cases 100% is in on the aldermanic races. And then, of course, at the top of the ticket with the mayor's race, you've got two self-described progressives running. What's the state of politics for your fellow Democrats in St. Louis?
I mean, you saw that with Cori Bush beating Lacy Clay in August. But you see the 5th Ward, Tamika Hubbard, longtime 5th Ward alderwoman, lost to James Page, yes. And then you saw the 13th Ward, which was Vicki Grass, supported by the police union and the firefighters, very heavily lose to Bill Stevens, which she beat pretty handily in the primary. You also saw Michelle Sherrod in the 17th ward, which was Joe Rohde's old ward, lose to Tina Phil, which was very close. Once again, all those three that I just mentioned are very close. Those are all the progressive candidates supported by Megan Green and Flip the Board. So I think that is very interesting. I mean, first off, our city is trending much more progressive, much more younger. And all those candidates kind of represented that. But also I think you have one left outstanding is Jack Coder's ward in the 7th, which encompasses Soulard and downtown, which will be very interesting to watch as well. But I think you're seeing the city trend as you're seeing nationally. You see AOC in New York City, Cori Bush. We're seeing cities trend much more progressive at the end of the day when it comes to these primary races.
I don't know if Jack Coder would have ever expected somebody would say he's not, Democrat enough or not liberal enough. He's, I think he considers himself a pretty tried and true Democrat in a lot of ways. And just another interesting point about that election particularly, and it's not the only one. This new voting system we have, he beat the candidate he's running against tonight already once because there were only 2 people in the primary, and then he had to run against them again. I don't know if there's a question there, but that might be something that the board and the city thinks about in the future, I'm guessing, when it comes to the way we vote right now.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I'm working for Jack, so I'm a big supporter of Jack. But, I was actually just at his house right before I got here. I think he's fairly confident that he's done the job and to support his ward from Fox Park to McKinley Heights to Soulard to downtown. I think he's done a great job. But I also think that Kelly's done a good job of rallying the base of progressives. Jack is by far a progressive, but I think that Kelly's done a really good job of trying to get that base out to support him. We'll see here. I mean, there's only the absentee and Jack's leading, but we'll see whether or not that Kelly can pull it out like Tina Phil did in the 17th ward, which was a huge surprise to me, honestly.
Interesting. This is good. This is granular analysis. You can't get anywhere else on city politics. I appreciate it. So, okay, are we just behind the curve of other cities like a Portland or an Austin, and this is just kind of the trend nationwide in the urban centers that are trending more progressive, or is something else afoot here?
We're a small town. I mean, we only have 300,000 plus people in the city. I think that's something to say. I mean, if you look at other cities like Nashville, Nashville is more of a metro area that combined their city and county 20 plus years ago now. And you're seeing that the urban core is very much trending progressive, mainly because it's trending younger. So younger people are moving into the city of St. Louis. They moved into the metro center of Nashville. Portland is a different area. It's almost hard to compare a Midwest value to a West Coast value, as Portland is. But the city of St. Louis is very much like a Nashville or even a Chicago. If you look at Chicago, I mean, younger people are moving into the urban core, unlike 20 years ago where younger people wanted to move to the suburbs. That's where they thought they could raise their family. Younger people now are wanting to move into the urban core for many reasons: jobs, affordable living, and also just the culture. And I think that's what we're seeing in the city of St. Louis. And
they're delaying families, statistically speaking, as well. That's a whole other conversation there.
Because we can't afford to have families.
Well, and therein lies some of the progressive politics of some of the more issues they would like to see changed along those kind of working class issues that they take up, whether or not all the working class folks think they're on their side. That's a lot of what we hear in the rhetoric, nevertheless. Okay, so any further prediction on the mayor's race?
I think Tashara, I said it in November when she announced it would be hard for her to lose this election, no matter who was in the race. She has won citywide, now 3 elections. She, won handily in August with a tough challenge. I think she was the candidate for the moment. Kara Spencer, to her credit, has run probably one of the best city races I've seen since I've lived in the city for the past 20 years. She has done a great job with field. Not only she's appealed to central corridor progressives, South City conservatives, city moderates, North City moderates. She's done a great job appealing to all those bases. So I would not be surprised for her to pull out a victory tonight, but I still think, I mean, we're seeing the numbers, but I still think it's Tashara's race to lose.
Well, you mentioned numbers. I'm jumping in and cutting you off because we have some fresh numbers. I don't know if we have this graphically that we can present just yet, but the latest total in with the amount, with 67% in, and it has narrowed more, but still Tashara Jones is in the lead with a little more than 51% to a little more than 48%. That 51 is right in the middle there, between 51 and 52%, and just a little over 48%. So, Braxton, final thought on 52-48. Is that as close as it's going to get, or do you think Kara Spencer can still make up more ground with 30% left to report, 33.4% still to report?
I don't want to be that person and say I don't know where they came in from, but I would like to know where those votes came in from.
Well, we'll get you that answer. Give us your final thought, and then we'll get that answer for you from Abby Larico. Go your final thought.
I mean, I said this morning that I think Tashara gets 54.5% of the vote, and I think she comes out to be our next mayor. I think it's really hard for her to beat. I saw a coalition of central corridor progressives around Tashara. Kara really needed to get those, split those 50-50 in order to win, and I didn't see that. In my ward, the 9th ward, we have our aldermen, endorse Tashara as well as our committee people, and I think that Tashara is going to come out the winner at the end of the night.
Okay, we'll know soon enough because they are starting to roll in. Braxton Payne, thank you for your time and your analysis. And like we said, granular, but that's what we like. It helps us understand the government that serves us all. So we appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks, Casey.
Okay, so let's now go back out to Abby Larico, who I believe is standing by at the Election Authority. Abby, are you able to hear me? And if so, what are you learning there?
Yeah, Casey, able to hear you, though it is definitely buzzing a lot more in just the last couple hours here ever since polls closed, because this is, of course, where they're bringing back the information from the different voting precincts and counting it all up and giving us these results printed, pages printed right here. It was just handed to me just a few moments ago, right before you went on air with these numbers, Casey. But just to reiterate, we are looking right now with 67% of precincts reporting and about 20% voter turnout right now. Kara Spencer stands at 48% and Tashara Jones stands at about 51%. So very, very tight race here. And I have also been keeping track here a little bit of where these votes are coming from here. So we're talking about spread really around the city of St. Louis. So we've got some wards in South City, some north, and some more in the central corridor. So if you're in wards 15, 25, 3, 9, 22, 12, 26, 28, 21, 6, 5, you're all in here. This is what we're working on counting, and these are some of the votes that we are including in some of these updated totals. There might be more, I will admit, ever since I've been standing by here, but we're working to keep track to figure out exactly where these votes are coming from, which of course can be relevant here because, as we are talking about with this primary vote, you saw a pretty stark divide between different parts of the city and who they were really gunning for. And so what will wind up happening here will be quite interesting, especially considering the folks who really pushed for a new method for electing a mayor. Part of the reason they're pushing for that is because they want a mayor with a mandate to lead, somebody who can get more than 50% of the votes in the city of St. Louis. And what that's going to look like, we're still learning. And as far as turnout goes, 20% might not be quite as high as the projected 30% that some of the more optimistic election authorities were telling us earlier in the day. However, it's also very important to keep in mind that this is much more than we are used to seeing at a municipal election, where it's not typically very competitive by this point, more like 10-12%. Casey?
Yeah, it's all about that perspective. You're right. Abby, I tell you what, you have access to information quicker than we do here, so why don't we turn you loose for a second? And if you're able to find out where they are still looking for the totals, if it's South City, North City, any particular ward, unless you have that in front of you now, I'll let you go and let you try to find that out, and we'll check back with you, either communicating through the booth or we can come back to you either way. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take more of a look at it. Some of these, they do say that they're 100% of precincts reporting. Others, I don't want to give wrong information here, Casey. So
Yeah.
I will say, though, that when it comes to where in the city are we still waiting for more results, initially we were seeing a lot of the cars that were coming in with these boxes were from South City, and then it started to trickle up north a little bit, more central corridor. I want to get a double check on that before I tell you too much. But so far, kind of around the whole city.
Okay, very good. We'll let you work, Abby. Thank you very much. That helps us, and it helps inform our next conversation. Like we do in every election, we like to bring in 5 on your side political analyst Anita Mannion. Anita is, of course, with the University of Missouri St. Louis and with 5 on your side as our political analyst. Okay, Anita is with us. Anita, your take as you see these numbers start to change, narrow a little bit in the mayor's race.
Yeah, I have to agree with Braxton that we need to see where those votes are coming from to sort of know what it means for each candidate. But right now, it's a pretty tight race. And the polling running up to tonight showed just about a 4 or 5% margin, which was within the margin of error. I agree with some of your former guests that Tashara Jones came into this as the favorite. And I also think the fact that the flip the board, the aldermen, we're seeing some of the more progressive candidates doing well, which would bode well for Tashara Jones.
Colin Jeffrey is here in studio with me, and he is going to coordinate with Abby, and they're going to kind of try to figure out the answer to that. It's right in front of us, but you have to write it down. Yeah, and by the time you write it down, it changes. So we're trying to figure out all of this information that we'll have at our fingertips tomorrow. It'll be much easier to analyze. So I'm sorry, I was doing 2 things at once there, Anita. So forgive me if this repeats a little bit of what we've already talked about. But your analysis on this flip the board movement, this push to more progressive politics, they now have the chore, if that is indeed successful on a larger scale, and we know they're going to have a more progressive mayor in either way. I guess now the challenge is to govern and show people that there is real substance to what they've been saying.
That's right. You know, you asked earlier about what does the mayor of St. Louis really do, and we do have what some people refer to as a weak mayor system, which means the Board of Aldermen has a lot of power, the comptroller has power, and so if there is a progressive mayor, which we know there will be, and the Board of Aldermen becomes more progressive, then they can actually accomplish a lot more in tandem.
And then, of course, when you think about your wish list as a politician or elected official that you might want to do, those things take money. And then so usually that means, especially in a city that's not particularly growing, you're going to have to cut money from some budget to have money for your pet projects. Look out, we're getting $500 million plus from the federal government. So there's the potential for potentially, is it too strong to say a progressive perfect storm? Potentially a mandate, potentially willing parties to work together, and then the money to do something with it? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very unique opportunity that the leadership in St. Louis City will have. We're getting one of the largest amounts of money of any city in the country. And so we'll have over $500 million to allot, and they'll have a lot of say in deciding where that money goes.
What can the city government do with that kind of money? Or are there so many holes to fill that a lot of it will be unseen? Or is there something radical that they might actually do that people can point to and say, yes or no, I don't like that? What is that? That's a broad question, but do you see anything that could be visible and tangible for folks?
Well, when you talk about filling holes, you know, that is one of the areas, right? Literally filling holes.
Can't drive down the street. I love telling this story in an embarrassing way. We had an exchange journalist from Pakistan not too long ago who couldn't get over how bad our roads were. Nothing against the good people of Pakistan. You go to certain cities and it's fantastic, but for the most part, that's a developing nation, and a man criticizing the roads in St. Louis. Another tangent, my apologies, but you're right, our streets are terrible.
Yeah, so there's infrastructure spending that needs to have. Both mayoral candidates have identified housing and homelessness as an issue. Certainly criminal justice issues as another area where money could be invested. Crime and policing, but maybe not with these candidates investing so much maybe in the police force, but rather in other areas that might step in and do some of that work, like mental health, like services that would wrap around social services, other issues. So there's lots of areas in which St. Louis needs investment. And it will be up to the president of the Board of Aldermen, the mayor, and the comptroller to make those decisions with lots of lobbying and input from the Board of Aldermen.
And that is, you bring up the weak form of mayor, the form of government we had. There's a relationship that has to be had between the comptroller, the board president, and the mayor. Earlier tonight, we had Lewis Reed, the president of the Board of Aldermen, on. And even though I don't think there was too much love lost in the professional sense when he and Kara Spencer were duking it out in the primary, he did say no matter who wins, he's ready to work with him. And then we know he has at least they've talked about a long-standing relationship that he has with Treasurer Jones, predating their time in their current roles too. But that is a three-person board that has to get along to some degree.
That's right. You need at least two of them to agree on for whatever the spending is going to be. So it will be interesting. And of course, when you have this much money out there, you're going to have lots of lobbying from interest groups, from different wards and what they need. So it's going to be a real push and pull to see who gets that money and where it goes.
Yeah, there's even been some talk of, I'm blanking on the phrase, budgeting, what's the phrase, Anita? But nevertheless, they can sometimes take it to the ward level, let the residents actually vote on how they like to see money spent. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to divvy up the money there. Let me just kind of check in. Colin, do we have a general rough idea of where we're still waiting for votes to come in?
Yeah, we've got a handful, maybe half a dozen that you'd expect to sort of favor Tashara Jones.
Okay, so Colin's off camera here. I apologize. This is me being a pretty terrible TV producer on the fly here. But you're saying the outstanding wards look to favor Tashara Jones still, if we're just kind of conventional wisdom.
Yeah, and then some we really don't know because of this flip the board. So we don't quite know. But we've got a handful that are favoring Spencer, a handful Jones, and then a few toss-ups. But yeah.
I don't know if you're able to hear that, Anita, but he's saying, okay, so I don't know, given that, that's not much to work with. We still have about 30% or so of the vote out.
They're keeping it interesting for us.
Yeah, they are. And it's narrowed each time that we've got more votes in, but still, that's, I looked it up earlier, just in case it came to this. I have no reason for predicting this, and I don't know that anyone has, but just in case it was extremely close, you got to be within, I believe, less than 1% of the votes cast for the differential between the two candidates to have a recount. There is no automatic recount in Missouri. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But so I don't think I guess my point was we're still looking at a pretty solid win if these numbers were to hold right now, even though they're getting closer.
That's right. So we'll have to see how those next precincts come in and see where it stands. But yeah, as of now, that would be a pretty solid margin.
Okay, well, the good news is by the time we go on for the big show at 10 o'clock, we should know, I think. We've got about 35 minutes until then. They told us earlier today that they would have it by the 10 o'clock news. Any final thoughts on turnout or anything else, Anita? Abby pointed out that while it might seem a little anemic to get 25%, as far as city general elections go, that's a pretty radical turnaround. And then I've seen some studies that 25 is not that uncommon. Someone from the Post-Dispatch tweeted out a couple of articles this evening that I was taking a look at. Any thoughts on the turnout and the results of this new way of electing a mayor so far in Board of Aldermen?
I think the turnout is improved over past general elections, but if you think about the fact that those mayoral races were not at all competitive, I really would have liked to see higher turnout in this competitive race today.
Yeah.
We don't know the effects of the pandemic or other things are still having on voter turnout, but you would hope that a competitive race with two dynamic candidates who are well known would draw a little bit more voter turnout. Maybe the sewer issues weren't bringing them out so much, but you think at least the mayoral race would.
Yeah. The propositions are an interesting thing in terms of public response and whether people want to vote. I saw you on Instagram. I know you voted. I voted. I know Abby voted. Colin voted. So I guess we all did our part. All right. Well, Anita, hang tight if you would, because we'd like to catch you on the other side on KSTK 5 on your side on the air at a little bit after 10, if you don't mind.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, as we are as well. We always learn when we talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, back to the most recent numbers in the St. Louis mayoral race between Alderwoman Kara Spencer and Tashara Jones. You can see it right there. 68% are now in, 52% for Tashara Jones, 48% for Kara Spencer. A difference of a little more than 1,000 votes. Prop E, those numbers are also coming in from the city, 68%. This is a city vote only. This E stands for earnings tax, easily winning there. 79% of the city residents saying, we want to keep this. This is important to the city budget as they see it, as the city officials have said. So right now, Prop E, without much opposition, will be retained for another 5 years if these numbers hold. Let's go to the Metro Sewer District Proposition Y. 81% say, well, we'd like you to pay for this with bonds. Take out a loan, pay some interest, keep my rates lower, but pay a little more over time. 81% saying Prop Y should pass. All right, well, thanks for joining us for our online coverage. We'll have more results and analysis on 5 on Your Side at 10. You can keep track of the live results. You can see them just about as fast as we can. KSDK.com/election or the 5 on Your Side app. And if you'd like, you can text us 314-444-5125. Just put the word results in there and we'll send you back a link. Have a great night, folks. We'll see you at 10 o'clock on 5 on Your Side.